Welcome to Critical DMG, a podcast about two best friends who might have grown up but never grew out of their love for the Game Boy. We will be playing and reviewing every North American title released on Nintendo's original handheld console. This is episode 1. I'm Tony, and I think I like my Tetris better in attack mode.
And I'm Jeff, and today we'll be talking about arguably the first game released for the Game Boy. It's part of the 5 original launch titles, but it was packaged with every Game Boy. So we will be talking about Tetris.
Tetris.
So, as Tony mentioned, this is our first full episode. So we have done a quick intro episode if you want to know a little bit more about us, kind of a little bit more of what the show is going to be. You can listen to that, hopefully wherever you are listening to this podcast. Typically, right now, we would be answering an open quiz question from a previous episode. We didn't add that into the intro episode, so there's no quiz question here, but in the future, note, typically we would be answering a quiz question here. With that out of the way, let's talk about Tetris. So, Tony, immediate opinions. Should someone play Tetris today, right now?
This specific Tetris?
Sure. We'll say dust off the Game Boy, play this original Tetris right now.
No.
All right, interesting. I would say yes, but specifically because it is this Tetris. Can you give us a little bit of a background, back of the box read sort of thing for Tetris?
Ooh. I do love Game Boy boxes. I think that the box art, manuals, all that stuff from back in the day is sort of a lost thing.
One thing that I noticed, and I had played both the NES version and the Game Boy version, I never realized it was part of the box art to say "From Russia with fun." I learned that on this adventure through it this time.
See, so it's funny that you say that because the back of the box for Tetris actually starts right underneath the Tetris in big block letters, haha, across the back. It literally says the Soviet game sensation.
I read that in the manual, and again, I think I was just completely oblivious as a child, but I guess no shock there.
Soviet game sensation. Beams, boxes, zigzags, and L-shaped blocks drop down a narrow passage. Feel your pulse quicken as you spin, shift, and align the shapes for a perfect fit. It's challenging and demands split-second decision. Start at new heights for a tougher contest. Pick the music and set your pace from 20 progressive skill levels. I would say that about sums it up. Tetris is, it is exactly what it says on the back of that box.
Exactly. And like we said, it was a release title. It was bundled with the Game Boy, specifically over Super Mario Land.
I read that too.
I guess they thought it would appeal to a wider audience. So an interesting choice there, but it made Tetris, this version specifically, the best-selling Tetris version of all time. And it's around top 30 best-selling video games of all time with about 35 million copies sold. So definitely a very popular game, we could say. And to your point earlier of should they play this version, that's kind of why I say yes to this version. Is it's probably the most iconic, and again, it's the best-selling version of Tetris. But there are over 200 versions of Tetris on the market, so understandable if you have another favorite.
This one is supposed to be the creator's favorite version. I don't know if you had read that when you were just looking up background information, but I did see in a couple different places when people are talking interesting factoids about Tetris, the creator, Alexei Pajitnov, I believe is how you say his name, has gone on record as saying the Game Boy version is his favorite and closest to, I guess, his primary vision of Tetris.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think I had read that. Tetris actually was created in 1985, not for the Game Boy or Nintendo, and then ported over to Nintendo and the Game Boy in 1989 after some other releases on other platforms and things like that. But that was another thing that I learned was that, yeah, it originally was not a Game Boy game. Let's get into some of the mechanical discussion of Tetris.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so I think a lot of our listeners have probably played Tetris or seen it or are, I guess, aware of some of the clones that have come out. But this version of Tetris, and I think all versions, but this version specifically, the board is a 10 by 18 block board. So 10 blocks wide, 18 blocks tall. And the game pieces are tetromino.
Tetramino.
The game pieces are tetromino.
I love that word.
Yeah, Tetris, it was inspired by physical pentomino, so 5 block tile puzzles. I guess they switched to the 4 version, tetromino, because they felt that 7 variants would just be a more simplistic and a cleaner game than the 12 variants with the pentominos. So that's the basis. You have these shapes made out of 4 blocks each that fall from the top of this board. And as they get to the bottom, you stack them and you try to clear lines. So whenever a full 10 block wide section is full, that line will disappear. And that's how you continue to play. The pieces do have, I guess, colloquial shape names. I think in the NES, they have real names, but we're going to not talk about those because we're talking about the Game Boy. But the pieces are an I, which is the long 4 in a row, a J and an L, which looks like J's and L's, an O, which I take a little offense to. That's just a cube. It's just a cube. But
it's just a square.
but it's an O, I guess, technically.
Okay.
An S and a Z, which are the two little S and Z looking shapes. And then a T, which is the little T shape.
Okay.
Yep. Playing this, I do not like the cubes, and T's are your friends. That's kind of my takeaway from this. But those are kind of the shapes, and that's kind of the general mechanics, I guess, of playing the game. But Tetris doesn't really have a win condition. Do you want to tell us about the different, I guess, types of play that you can do with Tetris?
Yeah, there might not be a win con as far as when you play the mode A, which would be the stereotypical endless mode. You just keep going, keep putting the shapes in line, giving yourself Tetris so that you clear enough lines, it bumps up the speed, and you keep earning more points. But there really isn't the end that you are shooting for in mode A. It's just kind of a survival. In mode B, you set the settings, how fast you want it to go, how much garbage block, which they specifically are not normal pieces. It's almost like someone was already playing Tetris for you and left a bunch of misshapen and half erased blocks all over the place, and you just kind of have to deal with that. Very much more puzzly, and there's a definite end. You only have to clear 25 lines in any of the B mode settings, no matter what you actually attune your session to feel like. Once you hit 25 lines, that checks you out.
How long did it take you to beat?
How long did it take me? Well, endless mode I played for a good while. I think I made it up to speed 8. Not necessarily the highest, but it was going pretty fast by the time I finally just totally crashed and I lost my Tetris. Mode B, I tried on a few different settings, ranging from not quite the lowest. I want to say like low height and a low speed. So I don't know, like a 3-1. And then I tried something around the mid section. So maybe like a 5-2, 5-3. And then I tried for the maximum, which is 9-5, which means maximum speed. And basically half of your total vertical board space is already occupied by garbage blocks. So not only is there no room for error, but the game is already going at as fast as it'll go. And needless to say, I tried that one about 6 or 7 times and made literally 0 progress. So Tetris is not my forte, I found out.
All right, so this might be a rare occurrence where I'm the better gamer. So I completed 9-5 without issue. And I guess one slight correction. level 9 is the highest level that you can start on, but you do get to higher levels past that.
See, I would never have seen that because I'm not good enough.
Yeah, so in A-type, I did get to level, I think, 13 or 14, and it does get faster as you're going in.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I was never able to hit, I think my max score was maybe 60 to 70,000 points, which in type A, if you hit certain milestones, so essentially 100,000, 1,500,000, and 200,000, you'll get like a little bonus graphic once the game ends. And then in B type, when you complete 9-1 or higher, you will get a bonus little graphic at the end as well. So those are, what some people might consider winning is hitting those milestones. So general, I guess, difficulty. How difficult do you find Tetris?
In endless mode, in the mode A, I sort of am able to, I think because it starts out slow and then builds up and builds up as you progress, I can reach a little bit of a flow state where I am able to just focus on the blocks. I can see the next block queued up to come down and sort of give myself a little bit of time to figure out where it's going to go. But I'm not a super proficient Tetris player. I do like puzzle games, but Tetris is just not one that I guess my brain clicks with, as well as some of the other ones that I enjoy playing. I don't know that I would say that it's super difficult until the speed starts to ratchet up. I think if I was doing, not endless mode, if I was doing mode B, where you were able to set your speed and put the garbage there, I think the garbage would be less of a problem for me. It's the speed that catches me. Once the blocks start to fall at a much faster speed, like I said, I only made it to about speed 8, I really have a hard time making the snap decisions that you have to. I think that was on the back of the box. Now that I say that was totally unintentional. But I just can't fit the blocks where I need them to go fast enough to not make a huge mistake. And then when it comes to Tetris, one mistake really can snowball very, very fast. And the next thing you know, you go from, oh, I'm doing okay, to the little game over jingle ringing in your ear, and you got to start all over again.
I think I agree with that. So personally, I definitely enjoyed the type B more, where it was, it was a challenge, but it had a clear ending. And yeah, if you made a mistake, it was kind of over and you rolled it again. And each attempt was probably a couple minutes at that. I found type A, I think probably the correct way to do it is to start on a lower level and then work your way up in difficulty to kind of maximize your score. Mm-hmm. But I found that extremely boring. I found myself making errors in level 1 through 5, not because I think it was a skill issue, just because my mind started wandering, and that's not great. But 100%, like you were saying, when I was playing 9-5, I was kind of in the corner of my eye looking at the piece that was coming next. So we should say, typically the game board is the big thing on screen, and then on the right side of the screen you can see your score, different things, and then the bottom right has the piece that's coming next. So I would really be thinking about what I'm doing with that piece while I was moving the piece that I was doing, and I wouldn't be thinking about the movements I was making. I would just be like, okay, I know this is where this needs to go. I would do that as I was thinking about what I was going to do with the next piece. So I was always kind of like one piece ahead, and also I couldn't be thinking that hard because then my mind wouldn't work, Mm-hmm. Also, a quick aside, I wonder when Tetris came out, if there were kind of like those hardcore fans, because you can turn the preview off. If you hit select, it hides that.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I wonder if there were people back in the day who were like, oh, if you have the preview, you're not a real gamer. You're not a real Tetris player.
Of course there were. You asked that rhetorically, but I can tell you right now, the answer is yes, of course there were. They always are.
Yeah, I accidentally hit select once, and that's how you turn it on and off. And as soon as I saw it go away, I was like, "Oh, I know there were people back in the day
Mm-hmm.
who were, purists, and if you look at the next piece, then you're not." But anyway, that was my take on the difficulty. Is it seems like it's boring until it gets like a small portion where I feel like it's a good amount of difficulty, and then it just gets way too difficult. So it's like kind of a weird difficulty curve, in my opinion.
I'm just not really a high score kind of gal. So when it comes to a game like Tetris, where on endless mode or puzzle mode, we'll just call mode B, I guess, puzzle mode, the ultimate goal is to get a high score. Even though in puzzle mode, your goal is to finish the 25 lines, they still score you based on what kind of matches you made, what kind of Tetris lines you were able to get rid of. Did you do singles, doubles, triples, whatever? And you get extra points, or maybe it's just tallying up your points, and you can see that it's scoring you based on that. So you're playing to do a good job and make sure that you are able to clear the lines and not sink, and then your game ends. But ultimately, you're just setting a high score, and that's just not really engaging for me. So once I played through endless mode and I sort of saw how far I was able to get, I don't feel that same pull to keep going and keep going and keep going to try and get a better and better score. I don't know. It just doesn't grab me here in Tetris on the Game Boy.
I agree. Big number, go bigger is typically not one of the things that really motivates me to keep playing. Probably why I like the Type B gameplay better. I do like when you win, the level or whatever. I did want to ask you about controls. I noticed when I first started playing, especially 9-5, because I just kind of jumped right into it. I felt like it took probably 5 games or so for like my fingers to loosen up or whatever, and maybe that's just a function of getting old or something, but
It is.
the first ones. Yeah, the first few games, I actively felt like my fingers were just sluggish, and that's something I never really think about when I'm playing any other modern games or anything like that. Did you experience something similar, or?
I'm so used to the Game Boy at this point because I play on the Game Boy so much, or even on the Super Game Boy, and really enjoy like the feel of the Game Boy. So I don't think that I struggled with that as much. I definitely did find myself like psyching myself out as things would get faster and way overshooting what would, I guess, be called the optimal positioning for a piece. So what I mean by that is, say that you had an L piece and you knew that you needed to rotate it into the laying flat position. Okay, so I would try to do that, but when the game started to get faster and I would start to worry more because I was not playing as well and it was getting harder, it would make me press the button more times than I would need to, and I would slot the piece into the wrong place, or it would go in the right place but in the wrong position. And that was a really big contributing factor to the multiple times that I would lose. I don't want to blame the controls. I definitely am not saying that the controls are bad. I actually think the controls for Tetris on the Game Boy are very snappy and do exactly what they need to.
So are you a player that uses both the A and B button? Because it rotates them in different directions. A rotates clockwise, B rotates counterclockwise. If you go one too far, do you go back with the other button, or do you just mash one button continuously?
If I'm able to think the move through, so if things are still slow enough, I would usually try to go back. I would just do like, it would almost be like hitting Control Z on your keyboard. I would do like a little back tap of the B button to try and make it rotate backward. But when things were frantic, no, that probably also would be maybe a contributing factor, because I would basically pretend like the B button didn't even exist. And I was just mashing the A button, watching it spin in the same circle, hoping it was almost like a roulette wheel. Like, please let it land in the right position this time.
Yeah, I don't think I hit B once. I think even when it's slow, if I go one too far, I just rapid push 3As and hopefully that gets it there, because it should. But yeah, I'm definitely I don't know if I touched the B button once. So I did want to talk in this section as well about kind of some of the other games that you would say have taken influence, and I think Tetris is probably one of the best games to speak about this with, because I think it was so influential. So obviously you have falling game puzzles, Dr. Mario, Puyo Puyo, which I know is something that you've played in the past. Kind of any game like that, I think, takes influence from Tetris.
I love Puyo Puyo.
I know. As I was kind of like looking at other games kind of in that genre, I wanted to make sure to add that one, because I know you're a fan.
I don't think we'll get there on the Game Boy. I forget. I have to look that up. I don't remember if any of the Puyo Puyo games ever came stateside.
We'll find out. I would also argue that if I had to find a spiritual ancestor for a lot of match 3 games, Bejeweled, Candy Crush, all of those kind of things you just flick on your phone now without thinking too much. Honestly, I think kind of that would go back to Tetris as well.
It's the most ported game, I believe, pretty much in the history of games. So I don't know that the influence can really be undersold when it comes to Tetris, which is sort of why for this episode we were a little concerned about what there really is to say, because it's Tetris. It's on the Game Boy this time, but it's Tetris.
Exactly. It just extremely iconic. Is there anything else you kind of want to talk about with the mechanics, or anything else you kind of want to say to wrap up this section?
No, I think I am ready for a little break, and then I think, quite a bit to say, maybe more than I expected to say about the look and feel of Tetris on the Game Boy.
All right, let's do it. We'll be right back after a quick ad, and thanks for being here.
Yay.
All right, Tony, let's try to get this in one take. Maybe stay to the script this time? You're live in 3, 2...
A horrible global phenomenon is being reported in the modern era. Children who don't know what a Game Boy is.
I don't think it's that serious.
If you or anyone you know has children suffering from a chronic lack of retro gaming, we recommend subscribing to the Critical DMG podcast. We are experts on the Game Boy.
I'm absolutely not.
And we here at Critical DMG will ensure that everyone knows about the Game Boy, whether they're young or old, pro or noob.
Does anyone say noob anymore?
So don't wait. Share this podcast with your friends and loved ones that have kids, your coworkers, their kids, your board game group's kids. Spread the word. Play it out the windows of your car in the elementary school drop-off lane.
Please don't do that last one.
With your help, we can work to undo the damages of time and make everybody appreciate the Game Boy. Thank you.
All right, yeah, that last part's pretty good.
You know, the original Game Boy might not have been internet connected, but we sure are. So if you'd like to reach out to us, you could find us on Blue Sky at criticaldmgpod.bsky.social, or you could email us at criticaldmgpod@gmail.com, and either of those will get to us faster than you would expect for people who are stuck on tech from the 1990s. And we're back. So, in this next half of the discussion, we're going to change gears and talk about how the game looks and sounds and makes us feel. My wheelhouse. So, taking the lead on this one, I am going to say a few things about the overall look of Tetris that really stuck out to me. I think number one is I feel that Tetris on the Game Boy makes very economical use of the Game Boy's screen. And not only do I think that it does a good job of making use of that small space, but for what it is able to do with the tetrominos, in how not only are they different shapes, obviously, but unlike some other versions of Tetris that I've seen where the tetrominos are maybe different colors or they have the same patterning no matter what the shape is, one thing I really appreciate from an accessibility and readability perspective is that the pieces have different patterns inside them. So because the Game Boy's palette only gives them so many colors to work with, they added little circles or a pattern of squares or a sandy texture inside of the different shapes, so that even at a glance, not only was the shape definitely different, but the patterning was different. So it made it easier for me to see at a glance the difference between, I think you called them an L and a J, and for me in my brain to expect how pushing the A button would make that piece rotate. I was never actually any good at it. No matter how much I tried, I still always seemed to rotate it in the wrong direction in a pinch. But the fact that I was more easily able to distinguish between the pieces, despite the small venue of the Game Boy and how the colors don't allow for too much variation in 4 block sized pieces, I don't really have anything but positives to say about how they handled it here.
Exactly, yeah. So if you were to take a single one of those 4 cubes or boxes, you would be able to tell what shape it was from. So you know what the shape is without really analyzing the shape, just because of the texture or the appearance. The one thing I will say about that, it kind of rubs me the wrong way that the eyepiece, so the straight line piece, doesn't have the blocks shown. It's the only one that doesn't have that.
I can see that.
So I kind of, I don't know, something about it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I'll also say I am extremely nostalgic for the NES color palette of Tetris. But yeah, I do love that, again, you take a single block from one of those 4 blocks that make up each piece, and you know what block it is, and it makes it feel a lot easier to intuitively place a brick without analyzing the shape exactly.
Right. And for a launch title, I think that they do exactly what they need to do with what Tetris needs to be on the Game Boy, what it needs to look like, and what it sounds like. So the music I know is iconic, and I appreciate that there are 3 of them because I sort of love them all equally. I know the Tetris theme, what everyone thinks of as the Tetris music, which would be, I think they call it Music A in the Game Boy one.
Yeah, the A-type song.
Yeah, A-type song. I love that one, but I don't think that if the choice of music was out of my hands and someone just picked what music track I would be listening to when I played Tetris on the Game Boy, I don't know that I would be necessarily disappointed by any of them. I think that they all sound really good on the Game Boy as pieces of Game Boy music and representations of whatever classical or folkloric music they are supposed to be cribbing from or transliterating into Game Boy sound. They really all sound good, no matter which one you choose.
I 100% agree. I think growing up, I typically listened to the B-type, but I think that's just because I was trying to be, I don't know, contrarian or something. The A-type is by far my favorite, hands down, and I think a lot of that comes from the nostalgia, and it's just so recognizable as Tetris. You know,
Exactly.
I honestly don't know if I could do that with any other like music. And it's just so iconic. It's by far my favorite. Listening to it now, I was vibing to the Type A music for the entire, the entire hours that I was playing the game.
Sure.
So
Also, still talking about the sound and the audio overall, the sounds in Tetris on the Game Boy are pretty sparse. There really isn't a whole lot that ever plays while you are playing Tetris. You have a chime that will play when you level up, so your game speed gets faster on the endless mode. And you have, of course, the sound that plays when you make a Tetris and you clear a line. And that sound I really love. It really sticks out to me. The closest thing that I can think of that it makes me envision when I hear that wavy sort of woo sound when you clear a line is it's like a magic wand. Like someone has just waved a magic wand and that's the magic sound and then the line is just gone. And I probably could hear that sound perfectly in my head before I had even started playing for this episode.
I think the only other sound effects are when a block touches down, it makes a sound, and then the game over.
Well, I didn't get any rocket ships to show for mine, so is there any rocket ship sounds?
I don't know. So yeah, at the end there is music and stuff like that, depending on what level you've beaten. I believe the rocket ships that I saw there, it did have a sound effect. But to your point, I feel like I don't know if this is I don't know the right word for it, like what kind of bias it is, but all of the sounds sound exactly like they should in my head. And I don't know if that's because these are just such classic sounds, and so I've been trained that that is what that sound should sound like, or if they just did such a good job that they nailed it first go, and, a little bit of like chicken and the egg there, maybe.
Maybe.
But yeah, all of the sounds, in my opinion, sound exactly like they're supposed to.
I think one of the things that really sells it, and maybe this is actually more of a overall Tetris sort of thing, the whole package here on the Game Boy, when you say Tetris is played on a board, you don't necessarily think of a puzzle or a board game in the way that you would think of a tangible physical board game, but the way that the clack sound when a block lands and you put it down wherever your final positioning for it is going to be, the way that that sound hits is very board gamey. It almost sounds like you are sliding a physical piece clack into the column that you want it to stay at.
100% agreed.
So a little bit differently in this section, I do want to talk about how it makes us feel to play these games. I have a lot of attachment to the Game Boy Tetris because it's a game that, because it was a launch title, I got it with my Game Boy. I had it throughout the entire time that I can remember having a Game Boy as a kid. But more specifically, it was one of the only games that my mom would play, just at all. Not only on the Game Boy, just period. Back before there were games on your phone, my mom loved Tetris. You would catch her playing Tetris in off hours at home, sitting around, and that will always stand out. That even though I don't necessarily have a super fond attachment to Tetris on the Game Boy, I was not really good at it as a kid. I'm still not super great at it now. I have a deep nostalgia and affection for it anyway because my mom played it, and that's just really neat to me.
It's interesting you bring that up. And I guess, at the top of the episode, we mentioned they added this as the bundle game because they wanted to reach a wider audience. My biggest memory with Tetris is the fact that my grandma used to play 9-5 and crush it. For the longest time, the only reason I saw and knew what the outro or what the graphics you got once you beat that was because my grandma would, sit down on her couch. She had a little CRT TV that was probably, a 10-inch TV. So you had to,
Sure.
sit really close to it because, playing on the NES. And
Absolutely.
she would sit there and we would sit behind her. And in my mind, she had like a over 70% win percentage. I'm sure that's not correct. I'm sure I'm misremembering that.
Hyping up your grandma.
Right. But that is probably one of my earliest gaming memories, just in general. Because, yeah, this was at a time when I wasn't really old enough to be able to definitely not beat 9-5, but even really play games effectively.
Mhm.
But, yeah, that's my Tetris memory, is my grandma just crushing it at Tetris. And I don't think I saw her play another video game, solitaire on the computer once that was a thing. But
I think that might be all I have to say about that. Let me scan my notes again real fast. Oh no, my mom, the music, the sound. Nope, I think that about covers it. How about you?
yeah, the only other thing I think I want to mention is kind of going back to how oblivious I was. So when you win the game, or on the box or on the starting screen, you'll see a lot of like architecture, and it's all Soviet Russian architecture. And growing up, I always thought it was quite interesting and it was pleasing. I just never really put two and two together.
It was a different time.
But yeah, I think that is all that I've got for that.
Okay, so do we want to maybe revisit our initial impressions and hash that out a little bit more before we officially close out our discussion on Tetris on the Game Boy?
I think so, especially because, there was a little bit of disagreement, but I think we've both been very in line since then. So you said no, that you would not necessarily recommend someone playing this version, and you specified that, of Tetris. I said yes. And so the main reason I said yes is we've mentioned this is the best-selling version of Tetris, and it's kind of one of the originals. The NES and this came out, I think, both around the same time. And so this is really not the original Tetris. Obviously, that was in 85 and not Nintendo licensed. But this is really what made it popular. This is the game that did all of that. And I think that's why I think it is worthwhile to go back and play that.
I definitely have, like I said, attachment and fondness for the game. I do like the way it looks and the way that it sounds. So maybe if you were to, like I did, play on your Game Boy while you are doing other things, waiting for something, I was playing a little bit of Tetris during dinner stuff. I think there is a case to be made for that experience. Almost like if you can recapture something as close to the experience that you would have playing the game on the hardware in the quiet time that you just are looking for something to occupy your brain for a little bit rather than doom scrolling or something like that, there's probably something to be said about still playing this. Other than that, there are so many versions of Tetris, so many different, more visually engaging, with different music and sounds. If you want a multiplayer Tetris, there is definitely those that exist. So I don't even know that the link cable version of this would be another reason to play it. I just can't imagine coming back to this one over a more modern version unless you really wanted to play Tetris because you love Tetris and you want to play it on the Game Boy because you found yourself in a situation where you want to sit with your Game Boy.
That's fair. And I think my yes comes out of principle, not out of thinking that this is the best version of the game, if that makes sense. So I can
fair.
definitely agree with what you're saying.
Okay, now, are you ready? Since our discussion is over, I believe it's quiz time.
It is quiz time, and let's see how we do. Let's see. Hopefully, I get at least 2 of the 3 questions right, but we'll see.
I do know you like to go for 2/3 out of the quiz, so we're hoping
I'm realistic.
we should maybe do a spreadsheet just to keep tally as we go along of your overall scoring on these. We'll have to plan that out. So
All right.
let's start our very first quiz. Are you ready for Tetris quiz?
Let's do it.
Question 1. Tetris was the first game in space. In 1993, cosmonaut Alexander Serebrov brought his Game Boy and a copy of Tetris with him on a rocket flight bound for the Mir space station. In 2011, this famous Game Boy set was sold at auction for how much in US dollars? A. Under $500. B. Between $500 and $1,000. C. Between $1,000 and $1,500. Or D. Over $2,000.
You said in 2011?
It was 2011. It was sold at auction for how much in US dollars?
I'm honestly shocked at how low all of those are. But I guess 2011 was like more of the start of the craze with collectibles.
Just for context, this was the Game Boy that he brought, the copy of Tetris, and the manual for Tetris. And the manual and the Game Boy had the Mir space station stamp.
Yeah, I think if that sold now, it would be, if it hit $1 million, it wouldn't surprise me. So again, a little surprised with how low that is. Oh, which makes me want to think D, but you left out 1,500 to 2,000, which is an interesting question choice.
I only had 4.
Well, you could have just said over 1,500.
That's true. I didn't even notice that until you said it. I'm not trying to game you on this. That is a genuine mistake.
I need to be careful with how much information I give you on my thought process.
It's true. It's true.
A lot of times when I'm taking multiple choice questions, you can deduce things by the answers. I'm gonna say C. C was 1,000 to 1,500.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, between 1,000 and 1,500.
I'm gonna say that final answer.
Final answer C.
Yes.
It's C.
Yes. So complete guess. Did not know that, but
the listing was for, like I said, the Game Boy, the Tetris cartridge, and the Tetris manual. And the manual and the Game Boy had the Mir space station like stamp on them, although they had worn off almost entirely by that point on the Game Boy. And it sold for $1,220 back in 2011, which in today's money is about $1,800.
Yeah, again, I'm shocked. I think if that went on auction now, it would easily 10 to 100 times that. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But collectibles like that just seem like they're insanely priced now.
I believe it was for charity as well. I don't remember exactly what the conditions for the sale were, but I believe that it was sold for a charitable purpose. Don't quote me on that, though.
All right. Well, 1 for 1. We're getting there.
That's right. Okay, ready for question 2?
Yes.
The well-known Tetris theme that we talked about earlier is actually a Russian folk song known as, and I hope I'm going to say this right, Korobeniki. The folk song is based on a poem of that same name that was originally published in a magazine all the way back in 1861. What is the subject of that original poem? Is it A, about a duo of traveling peddlers and a misfortune that befalls them? B, a military general in a rousing battle? C, a comedic tale about 2 young lovers? Or D, a tale about a farmer's day and the virtues of farm life?
Oh, this is a complete guess. I was hoping there was maybe going to be like a band of traveling musicians, and that would explain the endings of 9 dash whatever when you see the musicians. But Unfortunately, none of that.
Nope.
Yeah, kind of complete guess, but I'm gonna say A. I like the traveling individual, so we'll say A. Final answer.
Final answer A.
Yes.
It's A.
Let's go. Pure luck.
Yeah, I make no promises on the relatedness of these questions to the topic at hand. So yes, it was A. The name, again, I hope I am saying this right, Korobeniki, actually means peddlers. So a very, very short summary of that original poem is that it tells the tale of these two peddlers that travel to different villages in order to sell their finery, only to be robbed and killed on their return journey to the village from the beginning of the poem.
That's sad.
Yeah. Oh, it was, I didn't read the entire poem. I had just read like a summary of it. Yeah, it's exactly what you would think a poem about peddlers submitted in 1861 is about. Okay. Ready for your final question.
Yes, I've already hit my 2, so I'm happy.
This one's just gravy. All right. Question 3. Not only is Tetris an enduring classic, but it also helped to show off the durability of the original Game Boy back in 1991. A medic in the US Gulf War sent Nintendo of America his Game Boy that had been severely damaged in a fire, hoping for a replacement. He got his replacement, but what happened to the original Game Boy he sent in after the team of Nintendo mechanics plugged a copy of Tetris into it? A. It was unusable, so the Nintendo mechanics threw it in the trash. B. It didn't respond, and while Nintendo mechanics tried to save it, they ultimately failed. C. It turned on, so Nintendo mechanics swapped out all the salvageable parts into a brand new model. Or D. It worked enough to play the demo mode for Tetris, so they left it as it is and they put it on display.
Definitely D.
So confident.
I don't know this for sure, but I'm just confident that this is D. Otherwise, I think it would be just a story lost in time. So I'm quite confident that it's D.
Final answer D.
Yes.
It's D.
I think if it were anything other than that, like I said, I think it would be a story just lost to time. So
sure, that makes sense. So the way that it worked is the Nintendo mechanics put in a copy of Tetris, and they found that even though the Game Boy was essentially a charcoal brick at this point, it turned on and it ran the game, but the A and B buttons and the directional pad were non-functional. So they couldn't play the game, but they were still so surprised that it worked at all that they decided to repair it as minimally as possible, and they put it on display at the New York City Nintendo store for like 20 years until they took it and sent it back to the Nintendo of America headquarters in the 20-teens, I believe. I don't remember exactly when. It sat in New York City for about 20 years.
Interesting. All right, 3 for 3.
Yeah.
Let's go. So that's it for the quiz questions for me. I believe you have a question for our listeners.
That's right. That's it for you. But the question for this time that we will pick the answer up for on the next episode is, in the gameplay section, and also sort of in the creative section as well, we talked about the rockets and the shuttles that can launch when you score highly in Tetris. These are actually based on real-life spacecraft from the Soviet Union. What real-life model is the space shuttle you see launching at the end of a B mode win based on? So when you play B mode at the highest setting that they allow you to earn this space shuttle showing up, what real-life model is that space shuttle based on?
I think I know this one.
We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll have to wait till our next episode to find out. And listeners, if you know, definitely let us know what you think it is. Thanks for listening to Critical DMG. If you would like to support us further, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts and maybe recommend us to your friends or anyone else you know who might like the show. It really helps us out, and we really appreciate it. Join us next time when we will talk about Super Mario Land.
Off to Sarasa Land with us.
Off to Sarasa Land.
Bye.